I'm Ella Morgan, 37 years old, living in Raleigh, North Carolina. If you looked at me now, running a tech company, expanding into the European market, you might think I was born into a family overflowing with support and encouragement, but I wasn't. I grew up in a household where the sunlight seemed to shine only on one person, my brother, Chase. As kids, we were inseparable. Chase, 2 years older than me, was always the ringleader, while I was the kid willing to climb onto the roof with him just to watch the sunset. In the summer, we built tents out of tablecloths in the backyard, pretending it was an alien space station. In winter, we rolled in the snow, racing to see who could slide farther down the hill near our house. Back then, I couldn't tell what was fair and what wasn't. Then high school came, and everything began to tilt toward him. Chase was tall, athletic, and made the football team as a freshman. Me? I loved robots and code. I spent evenings in the library prepping for math Olympiads and state-level debates. My parents, Linda and Howard, started spending more time in the bleachers, shouting his name every time he threw a good pass. Meanwhile, my academic awards were met with a single sentence. "Good job, honey. I knew you worked hard." I still remember the day of the state debate finals in Charlotte. I made it to the championship round, debating AI and tech ethics, a topic I'd spent weeks researching. I wore a teal dress and stood on stage with my heart pounding. I looked into the crowd, searching for a familiar face. None. They didn't come. Mom texted, "Chase has an important game today. We couldn't leave. I know you'll do great." I still went on stage. I still won first place. But when I held the trophy, my hands were warm, and my heart was cold. One time, I asked Mom, "Can you come to my science fair presentation this Saturday?" She smiled, gentle but distant. "I think your dad is planning a barbecue to celebrate Chase's win. If I can swing by, I will, okay?" Words like that over the years became tiny cracks in the glass. Not enough to shatter, but enough to blur the view. Every time I accomplished something, a published paper, a scholarship nomination, my family's response was nearly copy-pasted. "Wonderful, sweetie. I'm so proud." Then the topic would shift to how Chase had been named offensive team captain, or that he was being scouted by a university with a top football program. No one asked how I felt. No one asked what I wanted. By senior year, I earned a full scholarship to Georgia Tech. I remember the night I got the confirmation email. I screamed in my bedroom and ran downstairs with tears in my eyes. I imagined my parents jumping for joy or hugging me tight. Instead, all I got was a half smile and a flat comment from Dad. "Wow, Georgia Tech, that's solid. But what are you majoring in? Computer engineering? Sounds kind of abstract. Chase likes building real things, houses, bridges. That's more practical." I forced a smile and hid my disappointment behind something as thin as a sheet of paper. Eventually, I learned not to expect much. I bought myself birthday gifts. I celebrated my college graduation with dinner at a small Italian place near campus, and I worked. Partly because I loved it, partly because I didn't know any other way to prove I deserved to be seen. Chase? He went to state college on a sports scholarship and quickly joined my Uncle Howard's construction company. It was called Morgan Built, founded by our grandfather, and, of course, Chase was handed a project manager role right out of school. No struggle, no proving. "He has leadership in his blood," my mom would say, like it was some divine inheritance. I didn't have that. I had a keyboard, a screen, and lines of code. I used to think if I did well enough, they'd see me too. But in a house where favoritism wore the mask of equal love, certain things were just silently accepted. Chase was the sun. I was the shadow behind him. But that was just the beginning. After earning my master's in computer science from Georgia Tech, I didn't return to Raleigh. I didn't join Morgan Built as the in-house IT girl, like my mom once suggested over a bland dinner with dry roast chicken and my dad's silent glances. I moved to Austin, Texas, rented a studio apartment barely 400 square feet, set up a wooden table in the middle of the room, and started writing the first lines of code for what would become Lifespan OS, a supply chain management platform that people later called the backstage brain of retail. No office, no staff, just me and a second-hand laptop I bought off a classified site for less than half the price of one of Tiffany's handbags. Tiffany being Chase's fashionista girlfriend, whom I met only once at a Christmas party. I lived on instant noodles, powdered coffee, and a habit of cutting unpaid bills into squares to use as sticky notes. At night, I slept on a couch with a spring poking through the middle so sharply it made my back ache like I was aging in reverse. Every morning, I powered on, opened the compiler, and told myself, just one more line. Then one more, then 5 hours, then 12. Dad called, not to ask how I was, but to nudge me toward something more stable. Honey, I think you should come home. You're good with tech, I'm not denying that. But things like programming and startups, they're not stable. The family business always needs a project lead. I don't need stability. I need space to build something that matters. That's the kind of talk people use before they ever cut a paycheck. I hung up. He didn't call back. Mom emailed, short and vague. We just landed a new contract in Savannah at Morgan Built. If you want, I can ask your dad to save you a spot. Think it over. I replied. Thanks, Mom, but I'm busy, building something unstable. She never responded. It wasn't until the 18th month of officially forming Lifespan OS as an LLC that I got my first real client. A supermarket chain in Oklahoma was drowning in post-pandemic inventory issues and happened to hear me speak at a local startup panel. I presented using a worn-out dry erase marker and a personal laptop with a flickering screen. But they saw something in what I'd built. Or maybe they saw the raw mix of desperation and passion written across my forehead. The contract was worth $48,000. I cried in the elevator after signing it. A few months later, a forum post in a logistics community praised the unexpected effectiveness of a new platform. Then the emails started. Demo requests, partnership inquiries, investment offers. I hired 2 engineers and moved into a shared office in a former gas station. No sign outside, but inside we were rewriting how companies tracked, coordinated, and optimized their supply chains. One March afternoon at 2:07 p.m., I got a call from Rhonda Levin, Chief Operating Officer of Zeta Nation, a leading U.S. consumer goods distributor. Hello, Morgan. This is Rhonda Levin from Zeta Nation. We heard about Lifespan OS from our partners in Austin. I'd like to invite you to our headquarters in Chicago next week. Can you make it? I checked my calendar. The week was open except for a meeting room booking and a fridge cleanout. I can fly in Tuesday afternoon. Great! Bring your pitch deck and come prepared with data. Our chairman will be there. The meeting lasted 1 hour and 52 minutes. I stood before a long conference table, facing people who had seen hundreds of startups walk in and walk right back out. But I wasn't one of them. 3 weeks later, Zeta Nation signed a 3-year deal worth $12.8 million. That moment redefined everything. When I called home, my mom picked up. Her voice was light, as if she were standing in a cathedral. Did you read the news? They wrote about your software in Tech Frontier. Yeah, I was going to tell you, I just closed a deal with Zeta Nation. There was a pause that stretched a few seconds. Oh, I see. Good, that's good. But hey, Chase just bought a brand new Ford F-150, dark blue. Remember your dad's old pickup? Looks exactly like it. I ended the call before I laughed out loud. I used to think that once I succeeded, they'd come around. They'd see me. They'd be proud. But not everyone knows how to appreciate what they don't understand. Luckily, I didn't need them to. I just needed to know what I was doing. And by then, I had no doubt. I had built something that carried weight. Not to fill the silence left by others, but to create something that could outlast it. 6 months after the Zeta Nation deal, Lifespan OS caught the eye of the 4th largest commercial real estate conglomerate in the U.S., Bradford Holdings. It started when Eleanor Dorsey, their chief operating officer, attended a tech conference in San Diego, where I spoke about optimizing logistics in multi-tiered real estate operations. After the presentation, she approached me with a rare enthusiasm for someone who'd spent 30 years in the field. Ella, your system is making me rethink how Bradford operates its entire backend. I want to test it in 6 distribution centers before pitching full-scale nationwide rollout. We entered negotiations, tense, detailed, with zero room for error. 3 months of security reviews, 2 independent audits, 5 contract revisions. I showed up for every meeting, on time, with answers ready. I knew the magnitude of this deal. If it worked, it could be worth $30 million and open a path into the Asian market within 3 years. The agreement was signed on a windy Wednesday afternoon inside a glass-paneled office on the 28th floor, overlooking Lake Michigan. Eleanor and I shook hands, flanked by 2 legal advisors, 4 tech representatives, and 1 in-house photographer. No one in that room knew I had any connection to Brandon Morgan, the man engaged to Richard Bradford's only daughter. Brandon, or as the world still called him, Chase, was still my brother. Still the guy who defined himself by titles and connections more than actual competence. I didn't know when he had aligned himself with the Bradfords, but my mom casually dropped the engagement news during a phone call. Tiffany Bradford is beautiful and smart. Did you know Vogue once invited her to write a fashion column for young professionals? Her family's very well connected. Your dad says Chase is marrying up. Not a single question about me. No mention of Lifespan OS. No reference to the interview I had in Fast Company last week. I never mentioned the Bradford Holdings deal. Not out of secrecy, just because they'd never shown interest. Things only surfaced at the engagement party held at the Bradfords' estate in Connecticut. A white mansion sitting on a 40-acre property with its own golf course. Eleanor brought me over to meet Richard Bradford. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his silver hair immaculate, every movement controlled. As we shook hands, he said with measured cordiality, "You're the one behind the system Eleanor's implementing?" "Yes, I'm the CEO of Lifespan OS." "Excellent. Eleanor's been raving about your team. Already saved us nearly 5% in logistics costs just in the first quarter." "It's an honor to partner with Bradford Holdings, sir." My mom stood nearby. When she heard the company's name, she turned, eyes darting between Richard and me. "Ella, you work with Mr. Bradford's company?" I nodded. "A developer of the system Eleanor's using." Richard studied me for a moment, his gaze sharpening. "Morgan? You're a Morgan? Related to Chase? Morgan?" I kept my smile steady. "He's my brother." The air in the circle froze for 3 seconds. Richard turned to Eleanor. "Did you know about this?" Eleanor looked stunned. "No, I had no idea they were related." Richard faced me again. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because family ties have nothing to do with professional capabilities. Bradford Holdings signed with Lifespan OS based on performance, not bloodline." He didn't reply, just gave a slight nod, face unreadable. I thought that was it, but as I returned to the buffet table, Chase intercepted me. His face was pale. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "My job." "You deliberately kept it from me that you're running that company?" "No." "I just didn't think you cared. I actually sent Mom the Forbes business piece, but I guess she didn't pass it along. You know what Richard thinks now? He thinks you're humble, grounded. You're making me look like some entitled brat riding on connections. Maybe you should reflect on what gave him that impression." His jaw clenched. Tiffany walked up, whispering sharply, "Not here. People are watching." I walked away, never looked back. That night, back at the hotel, I opened my laptop. In my inbox was an email from Eleanor. "Ella, just wanted to say thank you for keeping your cool today. Richard values professionalism deeply. Though the family connection surprised him, he still holds you in high regard. Finance will wire the first $5 million next week as scheduled. Looking forward to continuing our work." I sat still for a long minute. My success didn't need anyone's permission, but the fact that it couldn't be ignored anymore, That made me smile. I and Dylan, my boyfriend, arrived at Chase and Tiffany's wedding on time in a private Range Rover we rented at LaGuardia Airport. Not to show off, just so I wouldn't show up looking out of place among a guest list filled with investors, company presidents, and Ivy League alumni the Bradfords had gathered like a living resume. The wedding was held at a seaside estate in Greenwich. White vines draped the facade, guest chairs formed a semicircle, and calla lilies flowed down the aisle like a white stream. People murmured about the 6-course dinner prepared by a Michelin-starred chef and the violinist who once performed at a presidential inauguration. I gave a dry smile when I overheard one of the Bradfords' aunts whisper, "If you're not going to impress at a wedding, when will you ever?" We were sent an honorary invitation, which I thought was gracious, until I realized my name wasn't listed on any seating chart except the original one held by the coordinator. When I asked, she awkwardly glanced down at her iPad, tapped a few times, then excused herself to double-check. 5 minutes later, an older woman in catering staff attire returned and led Dylan and me through a side door of the main event. We passed the dessert prep area, a few tubs of chilled champagne, and ended up in a small room behind the kitchen. No flowers, no golden lights, just a round table with a wrinkled plastic chairs. "This is the space that's been arranged for you," she said, unable to meet my eyes. Dylan placed a hand on my shoulder. I didn't react. The silence hung like a damp blanket in midsummer. "Sorry, is there some mistake? I'm the groom's sister." "Yes. Yes, ma'am." Miss Tiffany adjusted the list this morning. They said this was the backup location for last-minute changes. I took a step back. The wall to my right still had grease stains. A gray-haired kitchen worker slicing melon froze when he met my eyes. Tiffany appeared just as I turned to leave. Her Pronovius gown shimmered with crystals, a glass of Dom Perignon in hand, her expression as calm as if she'd stepped out of a bridal magazine shoot. "What's going on?" Her voice was gentle but carried warning. "The kitchen, Tiffany?" I stressed each word. "You placed me in the kitchen?" She chuckled, taking a sip of champagne. "Oh, there were just so many last-minute changes. My father-in-law invited some key partners. All the tables filled up. I hope you understand. I'm the CEO of the company that just signed a $30 million deal with Bradford Holdings. The groom's sister, not some flyer girl for the linen supplier." Tiffany let out a soft breath, the kind I'd seen in meetings when a client realizes they've been outplayed. Scott saw the chart. No one objected. "If you're that uncomfortable, I can have someone pack your meal to go." Dylan stepped forward, calm but firm. "Miss Tiffany, this isn't just disrespectful. It's a deliberate attempt to humiliate a member of your own family." Tiffany gave a polite smile and left before I could say anything else. I stood there, breathing heavier. The kitchen felt cold, even with the gas burners lit. I stepped into the hallway, leaned against the oak-paneled wall, pulled out my phone. My heart thudded. I searched for Scott in my contacts. "Ella, you made it?" I was just assigned to sit with the kitchen staff. Silence stretched a few seconds. It was the best compromise. I didn't want to stir up anything with my father-in-law. Couldn't bump any of the partners just for you." "You agreed to this? You need to understand. At a wedding like this, you have to balance things. Not everyone gets a main table seat. But not everyone isn't the CEO of your in-laws' logistics systems provider, are they?" Scott's voice dropped. "Just stay calm, don't make a scene. Tonight's just for show." I hung up. He said nothing more. I didn't need an explanation. Everything I needed to understand was as clear as the polished glass behind the wedding hall. I turned to Dylan. "I need 10 minutes. He nodded and stepped aside. I walked into the women's restroom, stood in front of the mirror. My lipstick was intact, hair in place. But my eyes, the one thing I couldn't hide, were threaded with red. I didn't cry, didn't gasp for air. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, my fingers scrolled to the contracts folder, found Gregory Evans. My COO. Subject: terminate all operations with Bradford Holdings. Body: send me the draft for contract cancellation immediately. Schedule an emergency meeting with legal. I hit send. The sent icon appeared. No dramatic music. No deep voice saying, "This is the turning point." Just me, in a women's restroom, during a loud, glamorous wedding, knowing I wasn't pushed down to this place. I stood up to rise out of it, and no one could stop me now. I left the restroom, walked down the main hallway, past the curious stares of guests holding glasses of wine, waiting for the cake-cutting performance. No one stood in my way. No one had that right. Dylan was waiting near the event entrance, his face composed, but in his eyes was a silent, unwavering trust. I didn't say a word. I simply took his hand, then released it after 2 steps and straightened my posture. Violin music swelled in the background, mingling with guest laughter. I walked directly toward the main table. Richard Bradford stood with his senior advisors, including Thomas Kettering, Bradford Holdings' CFO, and several other familiar faces from previous video conferences. They were discussing plans to expand the logistics branch to Phoenix. Tiffany stood nearby, still holding her champagne, her face as flawless as porcelain. Chase sat just behind her, scrolling through his phone. I stopped beside the table, just as the conversations dipped. Richard looked up first. His gaze caught something in mine. "Ella?" I nodded, voice steady. "I apologize for interrupting. I won't take long." The table fell silent. All eyes turned toward me, even from the next table. I pulled out my phone, dialed Gregory, put him on speaker. He answered after the second ring. "Ella?" "Greg, follow through on the email I just sent. Begin contract termination with Bradford Holdings. Effective immediately." No one had time to react. Laughter across the venue cut off like someone hit a switch. Tiffany blinked. "What did you just say?" I kept my eyes on Richard. "I've sent formal documentation. Legal is working through the clauses. We can't continue with a partner that treats its collaborators the way we were treated today." Scott shot up from his chair, the legs scraping the floor. "Are you out of your mind?" I turned to face him. "You agreed to let me sit next to the dish towel cabinet, Scott. I'm not crazy. I just can't pretend to be blind anymore." Greg stayed silent for a few seconds on the line, then confirmed. "I'll take care of the internal notice and schedule the team meeting later this afternoon." I hung up. Richard set his glass down and clenched both fists. "Invested months into implementing your system. This is a rash decision." "No. This is a necessary response to a consistent pattern of disrespect from your family. I represent a company with dozens of professionals doing their jobs seriously. Being shoved into a kitchen wasn't a mistake. It reflected the value your people assign to a partner. They don't recognize by title." Tiffany cut in, voice still wrapped in that fake sweetness. "This is a wedding. A few seat mix-ups shouldn't be treated like the end of the world, should they? If I were just the groom's sister, maybe not. But I'm also the person your company relies on to operate the entire supply chain across 3 of the biggest states in this country." Richard lowered his tone. "Terminating a contract today, here, in public, doesn't just put me in an awkward position. It could harm your company's own reputation. Then perhaps you should ask yourself why something this serious came from a seat assignment." One of the advisors, Mr. Harrington, hesitated. "Ella, is there any way we can renegotiate this?" I gave a polite nod. "With a new representative, not through the Bradford family." Shay suddenly raised his voice. "You just want to cause a scene to feel superior. You're jealous because today isn't about you." I looked at him, cold as the ice floating in a champagne flute. No one's jealous of someone who only got promoted because he was seated at the right table. No one said another word. I turned and walked out of the main area. The warmth on my back from their eyes lingered, but I didn't need to turn to know who was watching, who was whispering. Dylan followed quietly, holding the door open when we reached the side exit. Outside, the ocean breeze rushed against my face. I inhaled deeply, not to calm down, but to truly feel that standing up for myself didn't taste bitter. I turned to Dylan. I need something with real meat now, not those paper-thin tarts. He smiled, buttoned his blazer. I know a place with honey-glazed beef brisket. Interested? Let's go, but let me text Eleanor first. I quickly typed. Eleanor, the contract has been terminated as discussed. Please update internally. I'm ready to assist with technical offboarding to avoid disruption. Legal will follow up with details tomorrow morning. I hit send and slipped the phone into my purse. No turning back. No explanations. The decision had been made. And the only thing I walked away from that party with wasn't regret. It was the strength of someone who finally claimed the seat she deserved. Not waiting for an invitation. Not asking for permission. We had just stepped outside the main gate when high heels clicked sharply behind us, like someone nearly slipping on the marble floor. My mother, Linda Morgan, appeared, her one-shoulder evening gown dusted with crushed petals, her face stricken. Ella, stop right there. I turned, but didn't step closer. Her face was flushed, her eyes caught between fury and shame. Do you realize you just ruined your brother's wedding? I didn't ruin anything. They just didn't expect someone from the kitchen to speak up. You should have handled this privately, not put on a spectacle in front of all those important guests. Dylan started to respond, but I held up a hand. Important guests? I was one of them too, Mom. But no one in this family treated me that way. They acted like I was an outsider. Right, in a place they profit from because of my work. But why today? Why couldn't you just hold it in? Today was Chase's day. Today was the day this family decided I wasn't worthy of a seat among the people they considered important. So, don't blame me for acting like someone who actually is. My father appeared behind her, adjusting his blazer, eyes avoiding mine. You don't understand what you've done. You've made Richard Bradford furious. They're now reconsidering their involvement in the Morgan-built partnership. The Phoenix Project could collapse. Chase could lose everything. So in the end, it's not about how they treated me. It's about how scared you are of losing your son's deal. Dad fell silent, fists clenched. Across the lawn, a few guests glanced over as the tension became more audible. I lowered my voice, but every word still cut through the air. If Morgan-built falls apart just because one CEO demanded respect, then our company never had a solid foundation to begin with. And that's not on me. I walked away. Didn't wait for a reply. Dylan kept pace silently. Just before we reached the car lot, a middle-aged man called my name. Ella Morgan. I paused. He approached with a business card in hand. His gaze lacked the judgment I'd seen in so many eyes that day. Jason Fletcher, I head up tech investments at Vector West Capital. I just witnessed all of that. I glanced at the card. The Vector West logo stood bold on the left, the print crisp and heavy on premium stock. Sorry if that was unpleasant for you. He chuckled softly. On the contrary, I liked how you handled it. We've been watching Lifespan OS for about 6 months. Never had a formal chance to reach out. Today may not be ideal timing. But if you're open, I'd like to schedule a meeting. I nodded. I'll have my assistant get in touch. We're expanding into Denver and Seattle. There might be something worth discussing. Jason smiled, wished me a good evening, then turned and walked away. I got in the car and closed the door. Dylan glanced over. Did you see that? They're looking at you differently now. Because I made them look. My phone buzzed. A message from an unsaved number. Hi, Ella, this is Natalie, Aunt Kay's granddaughter. I was near the dessert table and saw everything. I just wanted to say, thank you for doing what I've never even dared to dream of doing. I won't forget that moment. I froze. Natalie. A name lost in the memory fog of childhood. The girl who used to curl into herself at family gatherings, never speaking more than 2 words. Turns out, Silence doesn't mean invisibility. Some people watch. They've just never stepped forward. Dylan gently tapped my hand. You didn't just do something big for yourself. I said nothing, only rolled the window down, letting the sea breeze sweep away the cloying perfume still hanging in the air. We left the venue just as the ballroom lights brightened for the evening gala. The crowd behind us shrank in the rear view, the music fading as we sped past beachfront homes. On the way back to the hotel, 3 emails from other companies on the guest list popped into my inbox. Meeting requests, partnership proposals, speaker invitations. The earthquake they called destructive had cracked something open. Not to collapse it, but to clear a path forward. On Monday morning after the wedding, an email from Eleanor Dorsey landed in my inbox at 6:43 a.m. Subject: Urgent, can we talk? I skimmed it. A sincere apology, a wish to reopen discussions, and a request to arrange a private meeting with Richard Bradford within 48 hours. I didn't reply right away. At 9:20, a call came in from the Bradford Holdings switchboard. I let it ring 6 times, then hit decline. No need for more diplomatic niceties. When respect is strangled by power, negotiation becomes nothing but a performance to save face. Lifespan OS lost nearly 22% of projected revenue that fiscal year. A number big enough to make any CEO sweat. But not long after word of the contract termination spread, quietly but deliberately within investment circles, 3 other firms reached out. Among them, most notably, were Coastal Development Group and Apex Infrastructure Partners. The meeting with Coastal took place at their Santa Monica office. CEO Thomas Harrington, once a secondary partner of Bradford, opened with a dry smile. After what I saw that day, I decided I no longer want to work with an organization that treats its partners like something you can shove into a corner. You handled that moment like a true leader. I didn't react much, just nodded and pulled up my presentation slides. 3 weeks later, Lifespan OS signed a system deployment deal for all 19 of Coastal's distribution centers, valued at $18.4 million. Apex called just 2 days after that, proposing an investment package for expansion into the Canadian market. I agreed to explore it after reviewing our capital control policy. That Friday at lunch, while reviewing Q4 hiring plans with the COO, my personal phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ella, it's me. Chase, can we grab coffee? No business talk, just... I need to talk. I didn't reply immediately. Not until evening, after Dylan had left the office, did I respond. Sunday morning, 9:30, Lila's in Midtown. He showed up early. Dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled dress shirt. Something unfamiliar. Worn down. Gone was the guy who always entered rooms with a confident smile and CEO swag. We picked a table by the window. After some awkward small talk, he exhaled deeply. You have every right to be angry. I stayed silent. I enabled it. I didn't interrupt. I knew Tiffany changed the seating chart. Knew your table got moved to the kitchen. But I thought, if I didn't react, there'd be no fallout. I didn't want to upset Richard. I didn't want tension with Mom and Dad. So you kept things smooth by letting someone else take the hit. Chase nodded, unable to meet my eyes. I was scared you were better. More successful. When you got featured in Forbes, Mom still called me asking, Chase, when are you starting your own company? Every time, I felt smaller. So you chose to hide the fact that I built Lifespan OS? I thought, if Richard didn't know, I'd still be the worthy son. I wouldn't get compared. I was wrong. I stirred my coffee. The clink of the spoon echoed against the mug, like metal accenting a slow breath. I don't need an apology, Chase. I just want to know, did you ever, at any point over these years, believe I deserved respect? He looked up, voice thick. I did, but I couldn't admit it, because if I did, I had to accept I wasn't the chosen one anymore. I didn't feel pity or triumph, just a quiet crossing in the road, where two people who'd grown up together finally dared to name the shadow they'd cast over each other. That afternoon, I got a video call from Deanna Morgan, my dad's sister, once labeled the eccentric one for leaving the family at 31. She sat in a room full of oil paintings, silver hair pulled high, lips painted a bold red that defied her age. "You did what I couldn't in 1984. You always said couldn't, but now I think you just didn't have someone watching." Deanna smiled, didn't answer. She told me how my father once stood before the Morgan-Built board and struck her name from the founding roster, even though she designed most of the company's site management system in the 70s. She walked away, no lawsuit, no noise, but traded it for 30 years of silence in her own bloodline. They have traditions, never spoken but always understood. Only sons carry the family name. I broke that. No, Ella, you exposed it. That's the difference. I sat in silence after the call ended, feeling both a strange emptiness and something else. Something full and unnamed. Like I had just walked through a door that had always been shut, only to find others who'd been trapped behind it too. I may have lost a major contract, but I didn't lose myself. What I gained wasn't just new opportunities, but something deeper. Clarity about how I was treated. And the courage never to accept it again. I stopped answering my mother's calls when all she said was to defend Chase. No questions, no apologies, just the same endless loop of, "What's the point of dragging this out?" My father stayed completely silent, as if admitting anything would make the decades-old hierarchy crumble. But I was no longer waiting for anyone to wake up. I spent nearly 3 weeks at the office rewriting our growth strategy post-Bradford. Reports from the operations team showed our deal with Coastal had exceeded projections by more than 11%. Apex had just signed an investment memorandum. When the legal team handed me a new contract draft from Japan's Yano Group, I realized I'd moved beyond recovery. I was now in the phase of redefining. That was also when I drafted the initial outline for Visible, a mentoring program specifically for women in tech and business who had once been underestimated by their families or environments. The name wasn't random. I had once been shoved into a kitchen because they thought I was just the groom's sister. Now, I wanted every woman like me to be truly seen. I leased the old ground floor space where Lifespan OS had once started and turned it into a training hub. Each week, 20 participants rotated through skill workshops, one-on-one coaching, and talks from senior women leaders. No wall of fame, no fancy bios, just one question. How were you silenced, and how will you speak up now? During the 4th session, a young woman named Samantha sat quietly for 40 minutes. Just as we were wrapping up, she spoke softly. "I once wanted to start a user experience design studio, but my mom said, 'Don't make life harder for yourself, you're a girl. Get an office job that's stable.' So I did. But I've never stopped thinking about it. No one told her what to do, no one pushed her to quit her job, but the way she walked out of the room had changed. Her posture straighter, her gaze no longer dropping when greeting someone. One June afternoon, my mother called. She didn't ask if I was busy, she just said quietly, "I read your interview on Business Insider. They called Visible one of the platforms reshaping how women see themselves in business." I didn't think it would go this far. I said nothing. She continued, "Could you arrange for me to visit your office? I want to see what you're doing. Not to interfere, just, I need to see." I agreed, but asked for a time 2 weeks out. It wasn't about punishment, but to give myself space to breathe. When she came, I gave her a short tour. No long introductions, no grand gestures. We sat in a small meeting room in front of a project timeline for our support program for Indigenous women-led startups. She looked at me for a long time. Finally, she said, "I used to think you were chasing something vague, that you needed something stable, but now I see. What you've built is stronger than anything I ever believed was stable." I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I just said softly, I don't need you to blame yourself. But I do need you to understand, I can't go back to being the good daughter, just to be loved. She nodded. For the first time in my life, she didn't avoid that topic. A few days later, Chase texted. He and Tiffany had filed for a temporary separation. The reason on the papers read, incompatible life goals. He invited me to lunch. I picked a small cafe near the visible office. Nothing fancy, no curated dishes. We sat outside. The warm breeze carried the smell of grilled meat from the kitchen right to our table. He handed me an envelope. This is my resignation letter from Morgan Built. I submitted it last week. I looked up. What are you planning to do? I might not be able to build a company like you, but I don't want to live a life shaped by comparison anymore. I didn't praise him, didn't act like it was something grand. But as I looked at him this time, I saw someone finally beginning to live his own life. No longer hiding behind someone else's name to mask fear. That night, I stayed alone at the center. I repinned our Q3 goals board and added a new line, take visible beyond the borders of the United States. I stood in front of the glass, watching my reflection in the amber lights. It wasn't about longer hair or stronger posture. It was about finally choosing where I stood, without needing permission. Someone once asked, where does your value lie? I answered, not where others seat me, but where I stand tall, head unbowed. Ella Mitchell, once the overlooked daughter in her own family, has now become a symbol of resilience and autonomy. She not only built Nexus Technologies from the ground up, but also founded Visible, a platform empowering women who've been hidden in their own homes. Ella doesn't need late recognition. She defines her worth through action. To her, respect doesn't come from the seat someone gives you, but from the place you dare to rise and walk forward with full strength. What are your thoughts on Ella's journey and how she chose to rise for herself? Share your reflections in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel to discover more powerful stories about family and life's defining lessons.